About the war in Ukraine. As you are well aware, the whole world noticed that India, as a very influential country, has never publicly condemned Russia's assault and invasion into a neighboring country. Why is that so? Can you really be neutral in a war for which obviously one side bears all responsibility?
Well, look, I think in international relations, you have sometimes very complicated situations. And where we are concerned, we have always taken the position that the way out is for the countries concerned to get back to dialogue and to diplomacy.
I'll come to that soon, but is this a complicated situation? Is this really complicated? There's just one big country invading its neighbor.
No, look, I can give you many instances of countries who have violated the sovereignty of another country. You know, if I were to ask where Europe stood on a lot of those, I'm afraid I'll get a long silence. So do understand one thing. At the end of the day, we make judgments in foreign policy based on what we think are our long-term interests and what is good for the world.
India does not take part in Western sanctions against Russia, but has increased its imports from Russia 5 times since the war began. By this, are you not helping Moscow? Are you not financing Russia's war?
You know, Europe imported in the same period 6 times the energy which India did. So
but Europe decreased its imports a lot and dramatically since the war started. You multiplied yours.
No, essentially, if it is a matter of principle, why didn't Europe cut on the first day? Why didn't we see on 25th people out there saying go buy oil? Buying Russian gas is not funding the war. I think I'm entitled to have my own side. I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choices. Europe has to grow out of the mindset that Europe's problems are the world's problems, but the world's problems are not Europe's problems.
There is a club, the BRICS. Why this club? And do you consider that the BRICS will expand?
Well, to be honest, why the club? Because there was another club. It was called the G7 and you wouldn't let anybody else into that club. So we said we go and form our own club. Since you mentioned this specific example, I don't know how familiar people are with what was said at the Munich conference. Essentially, Mr. Soros said India is a democratic country, but he doesn't think the Prime Minister of India is a Democrat. By the way, a few years ago, in the same conference, I was there at that time, he actually accused us of planning to strip millions of Muslims of their citizenship, which of course didn't happen. It was a ridiculous suggestion. But you have to understand what this actually means. I could take a view that the individual in question, Mr. Soros, is a old, rich, opinionated person sitting in New York who still thinks that his views should determine how the entire world works. Now, if I could only stop at old, rich and opinionated, I would put it away. But he's old, rich, opinionated and dangerous, because what happens is when such people and such views and such organizations, they actually invest resources in shaping narratives. I spoke about globalization. Now what globalization does is it actually creates a lot of the seamlessness of globalization, which creates all the opportunities, also allows narratives to be shaped, money to come in, foundations to go about their agenda. Now in this particular case, it is very clear that he has very strong political preferences. He actually thinks that, doesn't matter that this is a country of 1.4 billion people, we are almost there, whose voters decide how the country should run. He actually thinks, well, if, and again, I cite him as an extreme example, okay? But there are other, manifestations of this in different countries, where people like him think an election is good if the person we want to see wins. If the election throws up a different outcome, then we actually will say it's a flawed democracy. This to my and the beauty is all this is done under the pretense of advocacy of open society, of transparency, etc. So our generation, we have grown up with concepts like regime change, which influence operations. Now, you can call it what you will. I mean, to me, this really looks the same, with a gloss of some kind of do-goodism on it. So,
and a lot of people here were very upset to see that embrace between the two leaders.
you know, in our part of the world, when people meet people, they are given to embracing each other. It may not be part of your culture, but I assure you it's part of ours.
Also, they were quite upset to see India overtake China in terms of the biggest importer of Russian crude oil. And also they say they're disappointed that there hasn't been an explicit condemnation of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
India is a big oil consumer. It's a big oil importer because we don't have oil. Now, it's not like there's a political strategy to buy oil. There is a oil strategy to buy oil. There's a market strategy to buy oil.
Take the following names. Rahul Gandhi.
I think that's where you want me to pass.
Prime Minister Modi.
Leader.
One person you wish to have dinner with, King Jong-un or George Soros?
I think this is Navratri, I'm fasting.
On a holiday, where would you rather go? Maldives or Lakshadweep?
You know, the president of Maldives is coming tomorrow.
Wrestle with what seems, to me at least, as something of a conundrum of India's simultaneous active membership in both the Quad and the BRICS, and for that matter, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
We can chew gum and walk at the same time.
All right, but can you be all things to all people and all regions? Does that really work?
You know, look, it's not that we are all things to all people. We are ourselves to all people. And the idea that countries must operate in a particular context or a particular structure, that's a very post-45 Cold War-ish idea. Times have moved on. So, there are today a lot of countries who feel that their freedom of choice, their operational flexibility should not be constrained because their interests are much more complicated and much more diverse than the binary picture which the Cold War era represented. So, certainly this, what I say applies to India, but look at the BRICS. I mean, you have today countries like UAE or Egypt or Saudi Arabia. Now, these are countries which have had strong relations with the West, still have strong relations with the West. So it's not like by being in the BRICS or being in SCO, you are necessarily sort of turning your back on your other relationships. I think it is that ability to operate in multiple contexts and multiple spaces, and that to me is a characteristic of
in continuation to the Canada a topic that you addressed, what would be your response to the latest reports that have come in where it is said that intelligence was shared amongst the Five Eyes about the assassination is what they're calling it, and the other thing is apparently the FBI has told U.S. Sikh leaders that there are credible threats to them. So just wanted your reaction to that.
I'm not part of the Five Eyes. I'm certainly not part of the FBI. So I think you're asking the wrong person.
We let you go. But I wanted to talk about Russia and then the neighborhood, because neighborhood situation is a sort of mixed bag. So let's first deal with Russia, how India-Russia relationship is going to evolve in this century.
You know, by the way, we're going to Russia. Prime Minister is going to Russia tomorrow. So timely question, thank you. Look, I put it to you very simply. If you look at our history with Russia after independence, I can say, and with fear of contradiction from anybody in this room, that Russia has never done anything to impact our interests negatively. Okay? It's a big statement to make, because there are Among the major countries, there are not many countries about whom you can say this. Now today Russia's situation is different. I think Russia's relationship with the West has obviously broken down. So you have a Russia which is turning much more towards Asia. So we have to ask ourselves, if Russia is looking more at Asia, should Russia not have multiple options in Asia? Should we as an Asian country not take, what is good for us in national interest? And clearly Russia as a major natural resources power has a complementarity with India at this stage of development when we are big resource consumers. So, people talk about Russian oil, but it isn't just Russian oil. It could be oil, it could be fertilizers, it could be metals, it could be coal. So there is a whole economic logic to it. There is also a basic strategic logic that if you look at the Eurasian landmass, there are 3 big countries. It's like 101 in international relations.
Now let's turn to Pakistan, the host of this year's SCO Summit. That's the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's a grouping of 10 Asian nations, including Russia, China, Pakistan and India. I know it does sound a bit odd, but that's just the beginning. The SCO is having a summit today and tomorrow in Pakistan, and India is taking part. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar landed in Rawalpindi today. It's the first visit by an Indian minister since 2015. First in 9 years. Jaishankar landed in Rawalpindi this afternoon. He was given a ceremonial welcome and then he was on his way to the summit. Indian diplomats to Pakistan will likely be supporting him during this meeting. Yes, India does maintain a diplomatic mission in the country, but it doesn't have a high commissioner. India's last high commissioner to Pakistan was expelled in 2019 when India revoked Article 370, Kashmir's special status. Since then, the commission has been headed by a deputy high commissioner. So there are Indian diplomats in Pakistan, but the relationship is broken. So Jaishankar's visit is a big deal. Even before he arrived, he managed to cause a splash. Yesterday we told you how Pakistan's opposition was trying to grab eyeballs. The PTI, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party, was supposed to hold a protest. They wanted to highlight the plight of their leader, former Prime Minister Imran Khan, who has been in jail since last August. The stage was set for the protest. The SCO was about to begin. International media would cover them. It was a golden opportunity. But then a PTI leader made a huge blunder. He invited Jaishankar, the Indian foreign minister, to their protest. That was an amateur move, and Pakistan's government capitalized on it. They've been heaping the pressure on the PTI, so Imran Khan's party has postponed the protest for some minor concessions. So Jaishankar managed to influence Pakistani politics, albeit indirectly, and that too without holding a bilateral. We mentioned this yesterday as well. Jaishankar is in Pakistan strictly for the SCO. There are no bilateral meetings scheduled. India will not talk to Pakistan until Islamabad stops promoting terrorism. Since that is highly unlikely, Jaishankar will only attend to SCO business. Tonight, that means attending a formal dinner hosted by Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. The main SCO summit will take place tomorrow. That's when we'll see results or the lack thereof. The SCO is a complicated group after all. It's supposed to be about economics and trade, but China wants to convert it into an anti-West alliance. India is not interested in that. New Delhi wants to focus on regional cooperation and trade and combating terrorism. But seeing as the summit is being held in Pakistan, that's too much to hope for. It's already obvious that Islamabad has more important things to focus on, like wooing Beijing. Shehbaz Sharif personally welcomed the Chinese Premier Li Qiang yesterday. Pakistan rolled out the red carpet. Chinese and Pakistani flags were flying side by side. It was quite the show, and it continued today. The Chinese Premier virtually inaugurated an airport, the Gwadar International Airport, which was paid for by China, built by Chinese money. Shehbaz Sharif was truly very grateful.
We had very comprehensive discussions during our two sessions today, and without going into any kind of repetition, let me, from the core of my heart, thank President Xi Jinping, thank you and the people of China for your generous gift in the shape of Gwadar International Airport.
With that pomp and pageantry out of the way, the Chinese premier met with Pakistan's real leadership, their chief of army, Asim Munir, and some other junta leaders. So Pakistan is mostly focused on the Chinese premier's visit. They're probably angling for another loan. Meanwhile, China is enjoying the limelight. It's an ego boost as it tries to reshape the SCO, to use it as a forum against the West. And then you have India in the mix. Jaishankar will have to sit through and endure all these grand schemes. It's going to be a long 2 days for the Indian minister.
Let us use this opportunity to exchange ideas.
Now let's turn our attention to Pakistan. The country just finished hosting the SCO summit. SCO stands for Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It's a Russia and China-led bloc with 10 member countries from Asia. Pakistan is one of them, and it was chosen to host this year's summit. By the looks of it, they pulled it off. No explosions, no terror attacks, no murder sprees of any kind. So Islamabad does deserve some credit for managing the bare basics. It was no mean feat. Pakistan deployed 12,000 security personnel to maintain law and order. They also shut down all shops and businesses. It was inconvenient for the locals, but the Pakistani establishment accomplished its main goal, pulling off an incident-free SCO summit. It must have been a relief for the attendees, which included some high-profile figures. You had the guest of honor, China's Premier Li Qiang. Pakistan was especially keen on showing him a good time. We'll get to the reason in a moment. Also in attendance was Russia's Prime Minister, Mikhail Mishustin. And from Central Asia, you had the Prime Ministers of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And the Prime Ministers of Belarus and Mongolia were also present. As I said, quite the high-profile guest list. India's Prime Minister was also invited, but Prime Minister Modi chose not to attend. Instead, he sent External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who arrived in Rawalpindi yesterday. It was the first visit by an Indian minister since 2015. He attended the SCO banquet last night, where he met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. This morning, Jaishankar began his day with a morning walk at the High Commission campus in Islamabad. India has a diplomatic mission in Pakistan's capital, and Jaishankar interacted with his colleagues there. He even planted a tree on the campus as part of the Indian government's tree plantation campaign. After that, he went to the main SCO venue. He took part in the photo op, stood for the family photo, got the pleasantries out of the way, and then got down to business, the main SCO summit. Now, before I get into the details, here are some things that you should know. The SCO began as a regional grouping to promote trade and security. Its main goal is, and I'm quoting, strengthening mutual trust and friendship and good neighborliness. I'm not joking. It's in the SCO Charter. The bloc initially comprised Russia, China and some Central Asian nations. It gradually expanded to include India and Pakistan in 2017. Then Iran came in 2023 and Belarus joined this year. Right now, the SCO claims to represent 40% of the world's population and about 30% of the world's GDP. China is one of the founding members. It wants to bolster the grouping further, turn it into an anti-Western bloc. Most of the other members are just keen on development. They want to use the SCO to set up infrastructure and trade, like Pakistan.
Like the Belt and Road initiative of President Xi Jinping, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is in its second phase, and the International North-South Transport Corridor should be expanded, focusing on developing road, rail and digital infrastructure.
Now, Pakistan calling for expanding infrastructure sounds like a good idea until you think about the money. Who exactly will pay for all of that? Well, you remember how I called the Chinese premier the guest of honor. This is the reason. Li Qiang was given the royal treatment. He met the who's who of Pakistan's establishment. He even ended up inaugurating an airport. And then during the summit, Shehbaz Sharif said, and I'm quoting, Pakistan supports the establishment of an SCO alternative development funding mechanism which could provide the impetus needed for the revival of stalled development projects. Basically, Pakistan just asked for a new loan, or rather a new bank to regularly take loans from. Let's see how China responds to that. And Shehbaz Sharif did not stop there. He had another zinger lined up.
The international community must step forward with urgent humanitarian support while calling upon the Afghan interim government to embrace political inclusivity, thereby ensuring Afghan soil is not misused for terrorism against its neighbors.
Yes, you heard that right. Shehbaz Sharif has a problem with terrorism, with terror being used against neighbors. Perhaps he should head on to nearby Rawalpindi and convey this to Pakistan's military establishment. It's a classic case of the pot calling the kettle black. Islamabad is fine with terrorism when it is used against India, but terror from Afghanistan is an urgent matter for the SCO. Talk about hypocrisy. Now remember, Jaishankar was at this meeting. He had to sit through this whole charade. But then he delivered his address and it summarized India's point of view. Jaishankar said, and I'm quoting, "If trust is lacking or cooperation inadequate, if friendship has fallen short and good neighborliness is missing somewhere, there are surely reasons to introspect and causes to address. If activities across borders are characterized by terrorism, extremism and separatism, they are hardly likely to encourage trade, energy flows, connectivity and people-to-people exchanges in parallel." The message was quite simple. The speeches at the SCO mean very little, honestly, if the member states don't adhere to the group's charter, if they don't behave like good neighbors. India's neighbors are China and Pakistan. One tries to capture territory, the other tries and keeps sending terrorists. Until these transgressions stop, India won't be very enthusiastic about the SCO.